The medical bay aboard the Galactic Alliance cruiser Harmony's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency. Dr. Elena Vasquez carefully adjusted the neural scanner above her patient's head, watching the readouts with professional concern. The injured soldier, a tall, scaled Vorthak warrior, had suffered severe trauma during the recent skirmish with rogue mining ships near the Kepler belt. Neural pathways are stabilizing, Elena murmured to her assistant, a blue-skinned Altarian named Kex. But the memory centers show unusual activity patterns. Kex's large, luminescent eyes widened. Should we be concerned, Doctor? Elena had served as the chief medical officer on Alliance ships for 6 years, long enough to know that unusual meant dangerous when dealing with alien physiology. Each species in the Alliance had evolved differently, creating a complex web of biological compatibilities and conflicts that made medicine both challenging and fascinating. Let me run a deeper scan, she said, fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The neural scanner whirred softly, sending harmless energy pulses through the Vorthak's brain tissue. The readings made Elena frown. That's strange. His memory engrams are forming new connections, but not in response to recent trauma. It's like his brain is actively rewriting itself. Before Kex could respond, the medical bay doors hissed open. A figure stepped inside, a tall, lean, with pale green skin and distinctive ridged features that marked him as Zephyrian. Elena had seen his species before, but never this close. They were known throughout the galaxy as master healers, their understanding of biological systems so advanced that many considered their abilities almost mystical. I am Thane, the newcomer said, his voice carrying a melodic quality typical of his people. I was told you required consultation regarding the Vorthak patient. Elena straightened, trying to project confidence despite feeling suddenly self-conscious. Zephyrians were legendary in medical circles. Their techniques had saved countless lives across the galaxy, and their knowledge of cross-species medicine was unparalleled. Dr. Elena Vasquez, she replied. I'm seeing some unusual neural activity that doesn't match typical trauma patterns. Thane moved to the scanner display with fluid grace, his movements almost hypnotic. As he leaned close to examine the readouts, Elena caught a subtle scent, something like rain on earth mixed with an unfamiliar floral note. It was pleasant, calming in a way that surprised her. Fascinating, Thane murmured, his fingers hovering over the controls. May I? Elena nodded, stepping aside to give him access. As she did, their hands briefly touched. The contact sent an unexpected warmth up her arm, and she noticed Thane pause for just a moment before continuing his examination. The neural patterns indicate memory reconstruction, Thane explained, his voice taking on a teaching tone. But not from trauma. This appears to be deliberate, guided reconstruction. Guided by what? Elena asked, moving closer to see what he was indicating on the display. External neural influence. Someone or something has been modifying his memories. Thane's expression grew serious. This type of manipulation requires either advanced technology or specific biological capabilities. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Memory manipulation was considered one of the most serious crimes in Alliance space. The thought that it might be happening aboard their own ship was deeply troubling. Could it be a side effect of the battle injuries? She asked hopefully. Thane shook his head, his ridged features casting interesting shadows in the medical bay's soft lighting. The patterns are too precise, too systematic. Someone has been carefully editing specific memories while leaving others intact. As if summoned by their conversation, the Vorthak patient began to stir. His large, reptilian eyes opened slowly, blinking as they adjusted to the medical bay's lighting. Elena immediately moved to his side, medical training overriding her concern about the memory manipulation. Easy, she said gently, placing a reassuring hand on the warrior's scaled arm. You're safe. You're in the medical bay aboard the Harmony's Edge. The Vorthak's eyes focused on her face, and Elena saw confusion there, along with something that looked almost like fear. Doctor, he said, his voice rough from the breathing apparatus he'd been using. I remember things differently now. What do you mean? Elena asked, while Thane moved to monitor the patient's vital signs. The battle. Before I was injured. I remember being angry, wanting to fight. But now. The Vorthak warrior struggled to sit up, his expression troubled. Now I remember feeling protective. Like I was fighting to defend something precious. Elena exchanged a glance with Thane. Memory manipulation that changed emotional context was particularly sophisticated and dangerous. Whoever was responsible had skills that went far beyond simple technology. "What is the last clear memory you have?" Thane asked, his voice gentle but probing. The Vortak closed his eyes, concentrating. "I was in the cargo bay, checking weapon systems. Commander Torres was there, briefing the squad. But..." He paused, confusion evident on his scaled features. "I also remember being somewhere else. A place with strange lights and voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize." Elena felt her blood run cold. False memories were even more serious than altered ones. They suggested that the manipulation wasn't just changing what happened, but creating entirely new experiences. "We need to run a full neurological workup," she told Thane. "If someone is implanting false memories, we need to understand the scope of the manipulation." Thane nodded, but before he could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "All senior staff report to the bridge immediately," came the voice of Captain Sarah Chen. "We have a situation." Elena looked at her patient, then at Thane. "I should stay with him," she said. "If someone is manipulating memories, he might not be safe alone." "I will remain as well," Thane said without hesitation. "My people have techniques for detecting and countering neural manipulation." As the ship around them hummed with increased activity, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something much larger than simple memory tampering. The precision of the manipulation, the specific targeting of emotional contexts, and the implantation of false experiences all pointed to someone with extraordinary knowledge of alien neurology. "Doctor," the Vortak said suddenly, his voice filled with urgency. "There's something else. In the false memories, I see a face. Someone who was controlling what I remembered. Someone who knew exactly how to change what I believed." "Can you describe them?" Elena asked, preparing to record his statement. "Humanoid, but not quite human. Pale skin, almost white. Eyes that seemed to shift color. And, when they spoke..." The warrior shuddered despite his thick scales. "When they spoke, it felt like their words were rewriting my thoughts as they said them." Elena felt Thane tense beside her. When she looked at him, she saw something in his expression that she hadn't noticed before: recognition and fear. "Thane," she asked quietly, "do you know what species that description matches?" For a long moment, Thane was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "HFY. The Memory Weavers. I had hoped they were just legend." Elena had never heard the name before, but the way Thane said it made her skin crawl. "What are the HFY?" "An ancient species, supposedly extinct for thousands of years. They were said to have the ability to directly manipulate neural pathways through touch and focused intention. According to the legends, they could rewrite a person's entire identity, make them believe anything, remember anything." The Vortak warrior struggled to sit up fully, his eyes wide with growing alarm. "If they're real, if they're here on this ship, then no one's memories can be trusted," Elena finished, the full horror of the situation becoming clear. The lights in the medical bay flickered once, twice, then returned to normal. But, in that brief moment of darkness, Elena could have sworn she saw a pale figure standing in the corner of the room. When the light stabilized, the corner was empty, but the feeling of being watched remained. "We need to get to the bridge," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Whatever's happening, Captain Chen needs to know about the memory manipulation." But, as they prepared to leave, Thane caught her arm gently. "Elena," he said, using her first name for the first time. "Before we go, I need you to know something. The HFY don't just manipulate memories at random. They're methodical, purposeful. If they're on this ship, they have a specific goal." "What kind of goal?" Thane's eyes met hers, and she saw centuries of wisdom there, along with genuine concern. "They seek to control key individuals. People whose decisions affect many others. Ship captains, political leaders, medical officers who might detect their presence." The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. "You think I'm a target?" "I think we all are," Thane replied. "But, as the chief medical officer, you would be particularly valuable to them. If they could control what you report about crew mental health, about medical emergencies, about the very investigation we're conducting right now." Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Not only was she potentially a target, but her compromised memories could endanger the entire ship. How could she trust her own thoughts, her own decisions, when the enemy could rewrite them at will? There's something else, Thane continued, his voice dropping even lower. Zephyrian neural patterns are highly resistant to external manipulation. My people developed natural defenses against the HFY eons ago. If you stay close to me, my presence might offer some protection. Elena looked at him sharply. You're offering to be my bodyguard? I'm offering to be your partner in stopping this threat, Thane corrected. But, yes, staying physically close would be advisable. HFY influence weakens with proximity to Zephyrian neural fields. The ship shuddered slightly, indicating they had changed course or speed. Whatever was happening on the bridge was serious enough to alter their mission parameters. Elena made a decision that would change everything. Then, we work together, she said, extending her hand to Thane. Partners. When their hands met this time, the warmth Elena felt was different, not just pleasant, but somehow protective, like a shield forming around her thoughts. Thane's eyes widened slightly, as if he had felt something unexpected as well. Interesting, he murmured, but, before Elena could ask what he meant, the Vortak warrior spoke up. Doctors, he said urgently, I'm remembering more. The pale figure, the one who manipulated my memories. They spoke about a human female, a doctor. They said she was the key to something called the Unity Protocol. Elena's blood turned to ice. The Unity Protocol? I don't know what it means, the warrior continued, but they seemed very interested in ensuring you would be in a specific place at a specific time. Elena looked at Thane, seeing her own realization reflected in his expression. The medical conference, she said slowly. Tomorrow I'm supposed to present my research on cross-species neural compatibility to the Alliance Medical Board. Representatives from 12 species will be there. Including the leadership of those species, Thane added grimly. If the HFY wanted to manipulate the memories of key figures from across the galaxy, they would need someone they controlled to be in position to do it, Elena finished. Someone the attendees trusted. Someone whose medical expertise would give them access to everyone present. The realization that she was being positioned as an unwitting weapon against the Alliance leadership made Elena feel sick. But, it also clarified what they needed to do. We have to stop this, she said with fierce determination. Whatever the HFY are planning, we can't let them use me to hurt innocent people. Thane squeezed her hand gently, and, again she felt that strange, protective warmth. We will stop them, he said with quiet confidence. But, first, we need to reach the bridge and warn Captain Chen. If HFY are aboard this ship, nowhere is truly safe. As they prepared to leave the medical bay, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. Not only was she dealing with an ancient enemy capable of rewriting minds, but she was forming an alliance with someone whose very presence seemed to affect her in ways she didn't fully understand. The corridor outside the medical bay was dimmer than usual, with several light panels flickering intermittently. Elena noticed that crew members they passed seemed distracted, some pausing in their duties as if trying to remember something important. The memory manipulation is spreading, Thane observed quietly as they walked toward the bridge. The HFY are testing their influence on the crew. How can you tell? Elena asked, though she had noticed the same subtle changes in behavior. My people learn to read neural disruption patterns. It's like seeing ripples on still water. Once you know what to look for, the signs are obvious. They passed a group of technicians working on a wall panel. One of them, a human engineer Elena recognized, looked up as they approached. Dr. Vasquez, he called out. Glad I caught you. I've been trying to remember, did you ask me to modify the atmospheric controls in the conference room? Elena stopped cold. She had made no such request, but the fact that the engineer believed she had was deeply troubling. No, Marcus. I never asked you to modify anything. The engineer's expression grew confused. That's strange. I could have sworn, but the memory seems so clear. You wanted the air mixture adjusted for tomorrow's medical conference. Thane moved closer to the engineer, and Elena noticed Marcus's confusion seemed to lessen slightly. When do you remember having this conversation? Thane asked gently. This morning, I think. Or maybe yesterday? It's hard to pin down exactly. Marcus shook his head, looking frustrated. Sorry, Doc. I must be more tired than I thought. After they moved on, Elena turned to Thane with growing alarm. They're not just manipulating memories, they're implanting suggestions about tomorrow's conference. What kind of atmospheric changes would serve their purposes? Certain gas mixtures can enhance susceptibility to neural manipulation, Thane explained. If they could alter the air in the conference room to make the attendees more vulnerable, then my presentation would become the perfect opportunity for mass memory manipulation, Elena concluded, feeling sick at the thought. The bridge doors loomed ahead, but, before they reached them, the ship's emergency lighting activated. Red warning lights bathed the corridor in an ominous glow as the ship's AI announced, "Security alert. Unauthorized access detected in computer core. All personnel maintain current positions until further notice." Elena and Thane exchanged worried glances. If the HFY had gained access to the ship's computer systems, they could manipulate more than just individual memories, they could control the ship itself. "We need to reach Captain Shen," Elena said, but, as they approached the bridge entrance, the doors remained sealed. "Bridge is locked down," came a voice from the intercom. Elena recognized it as Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the ship's security chief. "Sorry, Doc, but orders are orders. No one in or out until we figure out what's happening." Elena leaned toward the intercom. "Rodriguez, this is Dr. Vasquez. I have critical information about the security breach. It's related to alien neural manipulation, the crew may be compromised." There was a long pause before Rodriguez replied, and, when he did, his voice sounded different, somehow flatter, less expressive. "I'm afraid I don't understand, Doctor. There's no indication of alien infiltration. The security breach appears to be a technical malfunction." Thane stepped forward. "This is Consultant Thane, Medical Division. I can verify Dr. Vasquez's assessment. We have evidence of HFY presence aboard this vessel." Another pause, longer this time. When Rodriguez spoke again, Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "There are no HFY aboard this ship," he said in that same flat tone. "The HFY are extinct. They have been extinct for thousands of years." Elena looked at Thane with growing horror. Rodriguez was repeating Thane's earlier words almost exactly, but, with no emotion, no uncertainty. It was as if someone had taken Thane's statement and removed all human feeling from it. "He's been compromised," she whispered. Thane nodded grimly. "And if the security chief is under their influence?" The lights in the corridor dimmed further, and Elena heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, multiple sets, approaching from both directions. But these weren't normal footsteps. They moved with perfect synchronization, like a marching unit, but somehow wrong, too precise, too coordinated. "We need to get out of here," Elena said urgently. But, as they turned to leave, they found their path blocked. 3 crew members stood in the corridor behind them, people Elena knew, had worked with, had shared meals with. But their eyes were wrong, completely blank, and they moved with that same unsettling precision. "Dr. Vasquez," one of them said in a voice that was flat and emotionless. "You are needed for preparation. Tomorrow's conference requires your full cooperation." Elena felt Thane step closer to her, and that protective warmth intensified. The approaching crew members slowed slightly, as if walking into an invisible barrier. "Your resistance is unnecessary," another crew member said, tilting their head at an unnatural angle. "The Unity Protocol will bring peace to the galaxy. All species will share the same thoughts, the same goals, the same desires. There will be no more conflict. Because there will be no more free will," Thane replied, his voice carrying an authority Elena hadn't heard before. The compromised crew members turned their blank gazes toward him. "The Zephyrian," the third one said. "You were not expected to be here." "We adapt our plans," the first crew member continued. "The human female will serve her purpose. The Zephyrian will be removed." Elena felt a surge of protective anger. "Like hell he will," she said, stepping forward despite her fear. "I don't know what you things are planning, but it stops here." The crew members laughed in perfect unison, a sound so unnatural it made Elena's skin crawl. "Brave words from someone who doesn't understand the situation," they said together. "You cannot fight us, Dr. Vasquez. We are already inside your thoughts, inside your memories. We have been preparing you for weeks." Elena felt the world tilt around her. "What are you talking about?" "Your research into cross-species neural compatibility," the lead crew member explained with that horrible flat effect. Do you remember how you developed your breakthrough insights? The late-night inspiration sessions? The sudden understanding of complex alien neurology? Elena did remember those sessions, moments of brilliant clarity where solutions to impossible problems had seemed to appear from nowhere. She had attributed them to her subconscious mind working through complex data, but, now. You've been feeding me information, she realized with growing horror. My research, my presentation, it's all been guided by you. Your presentation will demonstrate the neural unity technique, the crew members confirmed. You will show the assembled representatives how to link different species' thought patterns. You will convince them to volunteer for the demonstration. And, once they're linked, Thane said grimly, they will become extensions of the HFY collective, the crew members finished. Perfect unity of thought and purpose across 12 species. The beginning of galactic peace. Elena felt sick as she realized the scope of the plan. The HFY weren't just targeting the Alliance leadership, they were planning to take control of the entire galactic government through those leaders. I won't do it, she said firmly. I'll refuse to give the presentation. The crew members smiled in unison, an expression that looked wrong on their familiar faces. You will give the presentation, Dr. Vasquez. Because if you don't, everyone you care about aboard this ship will suffer. Your friends, your colleagues, even your new Zephyrian companion, we will make their final moments very unpleasant. Elena felt rage building inside her, hot and fierce. These things were threatening innocent people, using her own crew as weapons against her. But, before she could respond, Thane spoke up. There's something you should know about Zephyrians, he said, his voice carrying a strange resonance that seemed to fill the corridor. We don't respond well to threats. The compromised crew members turned toward him with sudden wariness, and Elena noticed that their perfect synchronization faltered slightly. Your influence over us is limited, Thane continued, stepping forward with fluid grace. And our presence disrupts your control over others. As if to prove his point, one of the crew members, a young technician Elena had worked with just last week, blinked suddenly, and looked around in confusion. Dr. Vasquez? What's happening? Why am I standing here? I was supposed to be running diagnostics on Deck 7. The other two crew members immediately moved to flank the confused technician, but Thane was faster. He reached out and placed his hand on the technician's shoulder, and Elena saw the young man's expression clear completely. The HFY, the technician breathed. They were in my head. I could feel them changing my thoughts, making me believe things that weren't true. Elena watched in amazement as Thane's presence seemed to create a bubble of clarity around them. The remaining two compromised crew members backed away slightly, their blank expressions flickering with uncertainty. This changes nothing, they said, but Elena could hear doubt in their synchronized voices. You cannot protect everyone. You cannot be everywhere at once. Maybe not, Elena said, an idea forming in her mind. But I can use my medical authority to cancel tomorrow's conference. The crew members laughed again, but this time the sound was less perfect, less unified. The conference will proceed as scheduled. Too many important people are already en route. To cancel now would raise suspicions. Elena realized they were right. The Alliance Medical Board Conference was one of the most important events of the year. Representatives from across the galaxy were already traveling to attend. Canceling at the last minute would indeed raise questions that might ultimately prove more dangerous than the conference itself. But there had to be another way. As the chief medical officer, she had options that the HFY might not have considered. Thane, she said quietly, how many Zephyrians would it take to disrupt HFY influence over a large group? Thane's eyes lit up with understanding. It depends on the size of the group and the strength of the manipulation. But, for a conference room with perhaps 50 attendees, 3 or 4 of my people could create a significant disruption field, he finished. But, there are no other Zephyrians aboard this ship. No, Elena said with growing excitement, but there are other Zephyrians in this sector. And, as the chief medical officer organizing the conference, I have the authority to request additional medical support staff. The compromised crew members seemed to sense where her thoughts were heading. You will not contact anyone, they said urgently. Any attempt to communicate with outside parties will result in immediate consequences for the crew. But, Elena was already thinking several steps ahead. I don't need to contact anyone directly, she said. Medical support requests go through automatic channels. Standard protocol for events this size. She turned to the freed technician, who was looking at them with clear, grateful eyes. Can you access the ship's communication systems from here? The maintenance panels in this section have full network access, the technician confirmed. What do you need? Elena felt a surge of hope for the first time since this nightmare had begun. I need to file a routine medical support request for tomorrow's conference. 3 additional Zephyrian medical consultants, specializing in cross-species neurology. The compromised crew members moved forward menacingly. This will not be allowed. But Thane stepped between them and Elena, and his presence seemed to create an invisible barrier. The crew members slowed, then stopped, as if walking into thick air. Zephyrian neural fields, Thane explained to Elena without taking his eyes off the threat. We can project them when necessary. But I can't maintain this indefinitely. Elena turned to the technician. How quickly can you file that request? Give me 30 seconds, the technician said, already working on the maintenance panel. Elena watched the young man's fingers fly over the controls, hoping against hope that this plan would work. But, even as she watched, she noticed the compromised crew members beginning to push forward again, their blank eyes now showing flickers of anger. Hurry, Thane said through gritted teeth, strain evident in his voice. The technician looked up with relief. Request filed and confirmed. 3 Zephyrian medical consultants will arrive by shuttle in 6 hours. Elena felt a moment of triumph, but it was quickly replaced by worry. 6 hours was a long time to keep the crew safe from HFY influence. And there was still the question of whether the Zephyrians would arrive in time, and whether their presence would be enough to counter whatever the HFY had planned. This is only a temporary setback, the compromised crew members said, their voices now carrying an edge of genuine anger. You have gained nothing but time. When the moment comes, Dr. Vasquez, you will perform exactly as we have programmed you to perform. Elena felt a chill as she realized what they meant. Even if the Zephyrians could disrupt the HFY influence during the conference, there was no guarantee they could protect her from whatever programming had been implanted in her own mind. What did you do to me? She demanded. The crew members smiled that horrible synchronized smile. We gave you the knowledge you needed to create the neural unity technique. But knowledge comes with compulsion, Dr. Vasquez. When the moment arrives, when you stand before the assembled representatives, you will not be able to resist sharing what you have learned. Elena felt her hands begin to shake as the full horror of the situation became clear. She wasn't just a victim of the HFY plot, she was an essential component of it. And, even with help coming, even with Thane's protection, she might not be able to prevent herself from carrying out their plan. But, as despair threatened to overwhelm her, she felt Thane's hand slip into hers. The warmth and protection she had felt earlier intensified, and, with it came something else, determination, hope, and the unshakable conviction that together, they could find a way to stop this threat. We'll figure this out, Thane said quietly, his voice full of quiet confidence. Whatever they've done to you, whatever compulsions they've implanted, my people have techniques for countering HFY mental manipulation. Elena squeezed his hand gratefully, drawing strength from his presence. Around them, the ship continued to hum with normal activity, but she knew that beneath the surface, a battle for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. The compromised crew members began to back away, their synchronized movements somehow less threatening now that Elena had hope again. Enjoy your temporary victory, they said as they retreated. Tomorrow, ready or not, Dr. Vasquez will fulfill her destiny. As they disappeared into the shadows of the dimmed corridor, Elena turned to Thane with renewed determination. Then, we have 6 hours to figure out how to change that destiny. Thane smiled, the expression transforming his alien features and making them suddenly, unexpectedly beautiful. 6 hours, he agreed. More than enough time to save the galaxy. Elena found herself smiling back, despite everything they were facing. With allies like Thane and the promise of more help coming, perhaps they really could stop the HFY plot before it destroyed everything the Alliance had worked to build. But, first, they needed to survive the night. The service corridors beneath Deck 5 were darker than Elena remembered, lit only by emergency strips that cast eerie shadows on the metal walls. She followed Thane through the narrow passages, trusting his enhanced senses to guide them safely away from the compromised crew members. Where exactly are we going? She whispered, though the silence around them seemed so complete that even whispers felt too loud. There's a secured communications array in the lower sections, Thane replied softly. If we can reach it without alerting the HFY to our intentions, we might be able to establish contact with the incoming Zephyrian consultants. Elena ducked under a low-hanging pipe, grateful for Thane's steadying hand when she stumbled slightly in the dim light. What can we tell them that will help? Zephyrian neural defensive techniques can be calibrated for specific threats, Thane explained as they moved through the cramped space. The more we know about the exact nature of the manipulation you've experienced, the better they can prepare countermeasures. The corridor opened into a small maintenance chamber filled with humming equipment. Thane paused, his head tilted as if listening for something Elena couldn't hear. What is it? She asked. Neural static, he said quietly. The HFY are actively scanning the ship, trying to locate us. We don't have much time. Elena felt a familiar chill run down her spine, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a strange tugging sensation in her mind, as if something was trying to pull her thoughts in a particular direction. Thane, she said urgently, I think they're trying to influence me right now. Thane immediately moved closer, and the tugging sensation lessened but didn't disappear entirely. The compulsions they've implanted are growing stronger as the conference approaches, he said with concern. We need to work quickly. The communications array was hidden behind a maintenance panel that took Thane several minutes to access. As he worked, Elena found herself struggling against increasingly persistent mental intrusions. Images flashed through her mind, the conference room, herself standing at the podium, explaining the neural unity technique to an audience of eager representatives. But these weren't her memories. She had never developed any such technique, had never even heard of neural unity before today. Yet the knowledge felt real, complete, as if she had spent months perfecting the process. It's getting stronger, she said through gritted teeth. The false memories, the compulsion to share the technique, I can feel it taking over. Thane's hands stilled on the control panel. Elena, look at me. She turned toward him, and immediately felt the mental pressure ease slightly. His eyes, she noticed for the first time, weren't just pale green but seemed to shift and swirl with deeper colors, like looking into a calm ocean. Focus on my voice, he said gently. Zephyrian neural patterns create resonance frequencies that can disrupt external manipulation. Let my presence anchor your thoughts. Elena concentrated on the sound of his voice, the warmth of his presence, the way his proximity seemed to create a bubble of clarity around her mind. Gradually, the false memories began to feel less real, less compelling. That's better, she breathed. But it's still there, waiting. The closer we get to the conference time, the stronger the compulsion will become, Thane warned as he resumed work on the communications array. Eventually, even my presence won't be enough to counter it completely. The panel finally opened, revealing a complex array of communication equipment. Thane's fingers danced over the controls with practiced efficiency, and Elena was struck by how naturally he moved through the unfamiliar human technology. Zephyrians are naturally adept with neural-based systems, he explained, noticing her observation. Most galactic technology incorporates some form of bioneural interfaces. A soft chime indicated that he had established a connection. Elena watched as alien symbols scrolled across the small display screen, too fast for her to follow but clearly meaningful to Thane. I'm connecting with the lead consultant on the incoming shuttle, he said. Her name is Lyra, and she specializes in memory reconstruction and neural defense. Elena leaned closer to the screen. Can you tell her about the Unity protocol? About what they've done to my memories? Thane's fingers moved rapidly over the controls, and Elena could see the tension in his shoulders as he worked. After several minutes, he sat back with a troubled expression. What did she say? Elena asked. The HFY neural programming is more sophisticated than we initially thought, Thane replied grimly. Lyra says that the false memories they've implanted aren't just knowledge, they're emotional imperatives. You won't just feel compelled to share the Unity technique, you'll genuinely believe it's the right thing to do. Elena felt her stomach drop. You mean when the time comes, I'll actually want to help them? Worse than that. You'll believe you're saving the galaxy. The compulsion will feel like moral certainty, like the most important thing you've ever done. Elena closed her eyes, trying to imagine fighting against her own deepest convictions. How do we counter something like that? Lyra is working on it, Thane said. But she needs more information about the specific techniques the HFY used on you. We need to examine your recent memories, find the points where they intervened. Elena nodded, though the thought of having her memories examined made her uncomfortable. What do you need me to do? Thane pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a piece of jewelry. This is a memory resonance detector. It can identify artificial neural patterns and trace them back to their source. But the process requires close neural contact. What kind of close contact? Elena asked, though something in Thane's expression told her she already knew the answer. Neural linking, he said quietly. I would need to partially merge my consciousness with yours, trace the paths the HFY created in your mind. It's intimate, more so than most species are comfortable with. Elena considered this. The thought of sharing her mind with someone, even temporarily, was deeply personal. But the alternative was becoming an unwitting weapon against everything she had sworn to protect. Do it, she said firmly. Whatever you need to see, whatever it takes to stop this. Thane's expression softened with something that looked like admiration. Most humans would hesitate before allowing neural linking with an alien species. The vulnerability is considerable. Most humans haven't been turned into HFY weapons, Elena replied with dry humor that surprised them both. Besides, I trust you. The simple statement hung between them for a moment, carrying more weight than Elena had intended. Thane's eyes searched her face, and she saw something shift in his expression. Neural linking between our species is unprecedented, he said carefully. Zephyrian and human neural patterns are fundamentally different. The experience might be disorienting for both of us. Elena moved closer to him, noting how the protective warmth she had felt earlier intensified with proximity. Disorienting how? Zephyrians experience emotions differently than humans, Thane explained, his voice taking on a teaching quality. We feel things more deeply, but also more collectively. During the link, you might experience emotions that seem disproportionately intense. And you? Elena asked. Thane hesitated. Human emotions are more individual, more focused than what I'm accustomed to. The intensity might be overwhelming. Elena found herself studying his face, noting the way his ridged features made his expressions both alien and strangely beautiful. Are you worried about something specific? Neural linking often reveals feelings that the participants weren't consciously aware of, Thane admitted quietly. For both parties. Elena felt a flutter of understanding. The warmth she experienced in his presence, the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her, the strange sense of connection she felt, none of it was entirely professional. I see, she said softly. And you're concerned about what we might discover about each other. I'm concerned about complicating an already complex situation, Thane corrected gently. But, more than that, I'm concerned about your safety. If we can't neutralize the HFY programming before tomorrow. He didn't finish the sentence, but Elena understood. If they failed, she would deliver the Alliance leadership into enemy hands, and nothing between them would matter anymore. Then, we better make sure we succeed, she said with determination. Show me how this neural linking works. Thane activated the memory resonance detector, and it began to glow with a soft, pulsing light. Place your hand over mine, he instructed, positioning his palm over the device. The resonance will create a bridge between our neural patterns. Elena placed her hand over his, and immediately felt a tingling sensation that seemed to travel up her arm and into her mind. The feeling intensified as the device's glow brightened, and, suddenly, Elena was experiencing two sets of sensations simultaneously. She could feel her own hand touching the device, but she could also feel Thane's perception of the same contact, the warmth of her skin, the slight trembling in her fingers, the way her proximity affected his own nervous system. The link is established, Thane's voice said, but Elena heard it both aloud and as a direct thought in her mind. I'm going to begin tracing your recent memories. Try to relax and let me guide the process. Elena felt her consciousness expand as Thane's awareness joined with hers. It was like suddenly having access to a vast library of experiences and knowledge that weren't her own. She could sense Thane's deep understanding of neural patterns, his years of medical training, and, underneath it all, a profound compassion that seemed to be woven into his very being. But she could also sense something else, a growing awareness of her that went far beyond professional interest. Through the neural link, she felt Thane's perception of her, her intelligence, her determination, her courage in facing an impossible situation. It was like seeing herself through someone else's eyes, and the view was surprisingly flattering. I'm accessing your memories from the past few weeks, Thane's mental voice explained. Try to think about the moments when you had breakthrough insights about your research. Elena focused on those late-night sessions in her lab, the moments when complex problems had suddenly become clear. As she did, she felt Thane's consciousness moving through her memories like a gentle current, examining each experience with careful attention. Here, Thane said suddenly, and Elena felt him focus on a particular memory from 2 weeks ago. This moment, when you suddenly understood how to create neural compatibility between species, can you remember exactly how it felt? Elena concentrated on the memory, reliving the moment when the solution had appeared in her mind. But, as she did, she began to notice things that hadn't seemed significant at the time, a strange sense of detachment, as if the thoughts weren't entirely her own, and a feeling of being guided toward a particular conclusion. The artificial nature of the insight is clear now, Thane observed. The HFY didn't just give you information, they made you feel like you had discovered it yourself. Very sophisticated manipulation. As Thane continued to explore her memories, Elena found herself becoming more aware of his emotional responses. She could feel his growing anger at the violation the HFY had committed, his determination to protect her, and, something deeper, a growing affection that surprised them both. Elena, Thane's mental voice was careful, almost hesitant. There's something else I need to examine. The compulsion they implanted isn't just about sharing information. There's an emotional component tied to personal relationships. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the maintenance chamber. What do you mean? The HFY have programmed you to feel emotionally isolated tomorrow, Thane explained gently. They want you to feel alone, without support, so that the Unity protocol will seem like a solution to loneliness rather than a form of enslavement. Elena felt the truth of his words resonate through the neural link. The false memories included not just knowledge but feelings, a deep sense of being misunderstood, of being the only person who could see the solution to galactic conflict. But, there's more, Thane continued, his mental voice becoming strained. They've also programmed you to resist forming close emotional connections with others. If you were to develop strong feelings for someone, it might interfere with the compulsion. Elena understood immediately what he was implying. They're trying to keep me isolated so I'll be more susceptible to their influence. Yes. And, right now, through our neural link, they're probably detecting the connection forming between us. As if summoned by his words, Elena felt a sudden pressure in her mind, not the gentle warmth of Thane's presence, but something cold and invasive. The false memories began to assert themselves more strongly, and, with them came a wave of artificial emotions designed to make her distrust Thane. They're fighting back, she gasped, struggling to maintain her sense of self as competing emotions warred in her mind. Hold on to me, Thane said urgently, and Elena felt his consciousness wrap around hers like a protective shield. Don't let them convince you that what you're feeling isn't real. The pressure intensified, and Elena found herself bombarded with artificial thoughts. Thane was manipulating her, using alien mental techniques to control her just as the HFY were. Her growing feelings for him were just another form of programming. But, through the neural link, she could feel the truth of Thane's emotions, his genuine concern for her well-being, his respect for her intelligence and courage, and his own growing feelings that mirrored her own. It's not working, she said through gritted teeth, focusing on the warmth and protection of Thane's presence. I can feel the difference between your emotions and their programming. The mental pressure suddenly shifted, becoming less invasive but more insidious. Instead of trying to make her distrust Thane, the programming began whispering that their connection didn't matter, that tomorrow's conference was more important than any personal feelings. They're adapting, Thane warned. Instead of trying to break our connection, they're trying to make it seem irrelevant. Elena felt the false certainty beginning to take hold, the conviction that sharing the Unity protocol was the most important thing she could do, regardless of personal consequences. Even her feelings for Thane seemed small and selfish compared to the opportunity to bring peace to the galaxy. Thane, she said urgently, I can feel myself starting to believe it. The compulsion is getting stronger. Focus on specific memories, Thane instructed. Times when you've made difficult choices to protect others, when you've put principles above personal gain. Let those real experiences anchor your sense of who you are. Elena concentrated on her decision to become a doctor, the long years of training, the countless times she had worked to heal others regardless of their species or background. These were her real memories, her actual values, and they felt fundamentally different from the artificial certainties the HFY had implanted. Better, Thane said with relief. Your authentic memories are stronger than their programming. But, Elena, there's something else I need to tell you. Elena waited, sensing his reluctance through the neural link. The feelings between us, they're not just attraction or professional respect. Neural linking between our species creates the potential for something deeper. A permanent emotional and mental connection that transcends normal relationships. Elena felt a flutter of understanding. You mean like marriage? More than marriage, Thane said carefully. Among my people, such connections are considered sacred bonds. Once formed, they last until death and beyond. Elena absorbed this information, surprised to find that the idea didn't frighten her as much as it should have. And, you think that's what's happening between us? I think the potential is there, Thane admitted. But, such bonds can only form with mutual consent and deep emotional compatibility. They can't be forced or programmed. Elena found herself smiling despite their dangerous situation. So when I teased earlier about marriage, I was closer to the truth than I realized. Much closer, Thane confirmed, and she felt warmth and amusement flow through their connection. Those Zephyrian bonding customs are somewhat different from human marriage. How so? Elena asked, genuinely curious. We don't make promises about the future, Thane explained. Instead, we acknowledge what already exists between us. We say you belong to me not as a claim of ownership, but as a recognition of connection. Elena felt something shift inside her at those words, a sense of rightness that came from deep within her own heart. And, how do we know if such a connection exists? We already know, Thane said softly, his mental voice full of gentle certainty. The neural link has shown us both the truth of our feelings. The question is whether we choose to acknowledge it. Elena considered this as she felt the HFY programming continue to pull at her consciousness. But, now, instead of feeling isolated and manipulated, she felt anchored by something real and strong. If I form this bond with you, she said carefully, will it help protect me from their influence? Yes, Thane replied. But, that's not why you should choose it. The bond has to be genuine, freely given, or it won't work. Elena thought about everything that had happened since Thane had walked into the medical bay, the way his presence had immediately made her feel safer, the natural ease of their partnership, the growing certainty that she could trust him with anything, including her life. I'm not choosing it for protection, she said quietly. I'm choosing it because it's already true. Through the neural link, Elena felt Thane's surprise and joy at her words. The connection between them seemed to deepen and strengthen, becoming something that felt as natural as breathing. Elena, Thane said, his mental voice full of emotion, by the customs of my people, I acknowledge what exists between us. You belong to me, as I belong to you. And, by my customs, Elena replied, feeling tears prick her eyes, I guess this means we're married now. The humor in her words was gentle, but the commitment behind them was absolute. Through the neural link, she felt Thane's laughter and love, and, for the first time since this nightmare had begun, she felt truly safe. But, their moment of connection was interrupted by a harsh alarm that echoed through the ship's corridors. The communication array's display screen flashed with urgent messages, and Elena could see Thane's expression grow grim as he read them. What is it? She asked. The Zephyrian consultant's shuttle has been delayed, Thane said with growing concern. They won't arrive for another 12 hours, 6 hours after the conference is scheduled to begin. Elena felt her heart sink. Without the additional Zephyrian support, Thane alone might not be able to counter the HFY influence over such a large group. There's more, Thane continued, his voice tense. Long-range sensors show 3 ships approaching from the outer system. Unknown configuration, but they're moving too fast to be normal diplomatic vessels. Elena understood the implication immediately. Reinforcements. The HFY are bringing backup to ensure their plan succeeds. Thane nodded grimly. With additional HFY presence, even the bond between us might not be enough to protect you from their compulsion when the moment comes. Elena felt the false memories pressing at the edges of her consciousness, waiting for any moment of weakness to reassert their control. But, now, anchored by her connection to Thane, she could feel the difference between artificial programming and her own genuine thoughts. Then, we need another plan, she said with determination. Something the HFY won't expect. What do you have in mind? Thane asked, though she could sense through their bond that he was already beginning to understand her thinking. Elena smiled, feeling a plan begin to form in her mind not from HFY programming, but from her own intelligence and creativity. If they want me to demonstrate the Unity Protocol to the Alliance representatives, then that's exactly what I'll do. But not the way they programmed me to do it. Thane's eyes brightened with understanding. You want to turn their own technique against them. I want to show the Alliance representatives exactly what neural unity really means, Elena corrected. Not the peaceful cooperation the HFY promise, but the loss of individual identity, the end of free will. A demonstration that exposes their true nature instead of promoting it, Thane said with growing excitement. But, how do we ensure you can resist the compulsion to follow their programming when the moment comes? Elena squeezed his hand, feeling their bond pulse with shared determination. We practice. We use the neural link to help me distinguish between their false memories and my real intentions. And, when the time comes. When the time comes, I'll be there with you, Thane finished. Connected through our bond, anchoring your true self against their manipulation. Elena nodded, feeling more confident than she had since this crisis began. The HFY had made one critical miscalculation. They had assumed she would remain isolated, vulnerable to their programming. But, now she had something they hadn't counted on, a connection stronger than their artificial compulsions. We have about 18 hours before the conference, she said, checking the chronometer on the communication array. That should be enough time to practice resisting their influence and plan our counterstrike. And, to figure out what we're going to do about those approaching ships, Thane added soberly. If they reach the station before we can expose the HFY plot. Then, we make sure they don't, Elena said firmly. I may be the chief medical officer, but I'm also a member of this crew. And I'll be damned if I let some ancient brainwashing aliens take over my ship or my galaxy. Thane smiled at her fierce determination, and Elena felt his love and admiration flow through their bond. Together, they began to plan their resistance, two minds working as one against an enemy that had underestimated the power of genuine connection. The HFY wanted to use Elena as a weapon against the Alliance. Instead, they were going to discover that they had given their greatest enemy the knowledge and motivation needed to destroy them. The hours that followed were unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Working in the hidden maintenance chamber, she and Thane practiced using their neural bond to resist HFY manipulation while simultaneously planning their strategy for the conference. Elena discovered that the deeper their connection became, the clearer she could distinguish between her authentic thoughts and the artificial programming. When Thane's consciousness was fully linked with hers, the false memories felt thin and transparent, like cheap imitations of real experiences. Try accessing the Unity Protocol knowledge now, Thane instructed during one of their practice sessions. But, instead of accepting it as truth, examine it as a foreign object. Elena focused on the implanted memories about neural unity, but this time she approached them with clinical detachment. Through their bond, she could feel Thane's analytical mind helping her dissect the false information. I can see it now, she said with growing understanding. The technique isn't about creating harmony between species. It's about overwriting individual neural patterns with a single collective consciousness. Exactly, Thane confirmed through their mental connection. The HFY aren't offering unity, they're offering assimilation. Elena felt a chill as she fully grasped the implications. If they had succeeded with tomorrow's demonstration, every representative present would have become an extension of the HFY collective. They would have returned to their home worlds and systematically converted their entire populations. The beginning of the end for free will in the galaxy, Thane agreed grimly. But, as Elena continued to examine the false knowledge, she began to notice something else: flaws in the programming, ways the technique could be modified or reversed. Thane, she said excitedly, I think I know how we can turn this against them. The Unity Protocol has built-in safeguards that the HFY use to protect their own minds during assimilation attempts. If we can activate those safeguards for everyone in the conference room, we could create a feedback loop that would disrupt their control over anyone present, Thane finished, his mental voice bright with understanding. But, implementing that would require precise timing and incredible mental discipline. Elena felt their bond pulse with shared determination. Then, it's lucky I have the best possible backup. Over the following hours, they refined their plan while monitoring ship communications for information about the approaching vessels. The news wasn't encouraging. The three ships were definitely HFY in origin, and they would arrive at the station approximately 2 hours before the conference began. They're not taking any chances, Elena observed as they watched the tactical displays. 3 ships means dozens of additional HFY agents. It also means they consider this operation crucial to their overall plans, Thane pointed out. Success here would give them control over 12 major species simultaneously. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The entire balance of power in the galaxy might depend on what happened in that conference room tomorrow. There's something else we need to consider, Thane said carefully. If we succeed in exposing the HFY plot, they won't simply retreat. They'll likely attempt to eliminate anyone who can testify against them. Elena understood what he was saying. We're not just planning a counterstrike, we're planning a last stand. Perhaps, Thane said through their bond, his mental voice warm with affection despite the gravity of the situation. But, at least we face it together. Elena smiled, feeling the truth of their connection strengthen her resolve. Whatever happened tomorrow, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Their planning was interrupted by the soft chime of an incoming communication on the array. Thane quickly accessed the message, and Elena felt his surprise and relief through their bond. It's from Lyra, he explained. The Zephyrian consultant I contacted earlier. She's managed to break away from the main shuttle and is approaching in a smaller, faster ship. Elena leaned closer to read the message. She'll be here in 4 hours? That's cutting it close, but it might be enough. There's more, Thane continued. She's bringing something called a neural resonance amplifier. With it, the three of us should be able to project a protective field strong enough to cover the entire conference room. Elena felt a surge of hope. So we really can protect everyone from HFY influence during the demonstration? Better than that, Thane said with growing excitement. With the amplifier, we can reverse the polarity of the Unity protocol. Instead of allowing the HFY to control the representatives, we can use their own technique to expose their presence to everyone in the room. Elena understood immediately. We can make everyone present immune to future manipulation by showing them exactly what HFY influence feels like. A permanent inoculation against their mental programming, Thane confirmed. Once someone has experienced the contrast between free thought and artificial compulsion, they become essentially immune to future manipulation attempts. Elena felt their plan crystallizing into something that might actually work. But, as they finalized the details, she became aware of something troubling. The false programming in her mind was growing stronger as the conference time approached, and even their bond was beginning to struggle against it. Thane, she said with concern, I can feel the compulsion intensifying. When those HFY ships arrive, their presence is going to make the programming much harder to resist. Thane's expression grew serious. We need to establish additional safeguards. The bond between us is strong, but, against multiple HFY agents actively reinforcing your programming. What do you suggest? Thane hesitated for a moment before answering. There's a Zephyrian technique called deep bonding. It would make our connection permanent and much stronger, but it also carries significant risks. What kind of risks? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. If one of us dies, the other dies as well, Thane explained quietly. And the bond becomes so deep that we essentially share a single consciousness. We would still be individuals, but our thoughts and emotions would be permanently intertwined. Elena considered this carefully. Under normal circumstances, such a commitment would be terrifying, the complete loss of mental privacy, the ultimate vulnerability to another person. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Thane wasn't just another person anymore. Would it be strong enough to protect me from their programming? She asked. Yes, Thane said with certainty. A deep bond creates a unified consciousness that can't be manipulated by external forces. But, Elena, this isn't something you should choose out of desperation. The bond would last for the rest of our lives. Elena looked at him, this alien being who had become the most important person in her universe in the space of a single day. Through their current bond, she could feel his genuine concern for her well-being, his desire to protect her, and, underneath it all, a love so deep and pure that it took her breath away. I'm not choosing it out of desperation, she said softly. I'm choosing it because I can't imagine facing the future without you. Thane's eyes brightened with joy and relief. Are you certain? Once begun, the process can't be reversed. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Elena replied with absolute conviction. Thane moved closer, taking both her hands in his. Then, by the deepest traditions of my people, I offer you permanent unity of mind and spirit. Will you accept this bond? Elena felt tears spring to her eyes as she realized the magnitude of what he was offering, not just protection from their enemies, but a connection deeper than anything she had ever imagined possible. I accept, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Complete unity, for better or worse, until death and beyond. The moment the words left her lips, Elena felt something fundamental shift in her consciousness. The neural link they had been using suddenly deepened and expanded, becoming something far more profound than simple mental contact. Elena could feel Thane's mind merging with hers, not overwhelming her individuality but complementing it, like two rivers joining to form a larger stream. His memories became accessible to her, his emotions flowed through her consciousness as naturally as her own, and his knowledge and abilities became part of her mental toolkit. At the same time, she felt her own thoughts and feelings flowing into his consciousness. The fear she had been carrying about tomorrow's conference, her determination to protect innocent people, her growing love for him, all of it became shared experience. "It's incredible," she breathed, though she realized she had spoken the words through their bond as much as aloud. "This is how Zephyrians experience love," Thane replied, his mental voice now permanently woven into her consciousness. "Complete openness, absolute trust, unified purpose." Elena tested their new connection, amazed at how natural it felt. She could access Thane's medical knowledge as easily as her own, could feel his calm strength supporting her whenever doubt threatened to creep in. But, most importantly, she could feel the HFY programming trying to assert itself and failing completely. The false memories and artificial compulsions simply couldn't take hold in a consciousness that was no longer solitary. "It's working," she said with relief. "I can still sense their programming, but it has no power over me anymore." "Because you're no longer the isolated individual they programmed," Thane explained. "They can't control what they can't fully comprehend, and they've never encountered a human Zephyrian deep bond before." Elena felt a moment of fierce satisfaction. The HFY had tried to turn her into a weapon, but instead they had driven her to forge a connection that made her stronger than they could have imagined. Their moment of triumph was interrupted by the ship's alert system. "All hands, prepare for incoming vessels. 3 ships of unknown configuration are approaching. All senior staff report to battle stations." Elena and Thane exchanged a look of grim determination. "The HFY reinforcements," Elena said. "Right on schedule." "Time to put our plan into action," Thane agreed, rising from the communication console. "But, first, we need to brief Captain Chen on what we've discovered." As they made their way through the service corridors toward the bridge, Elena was amazed at how different everything felt with the deep bond in place. She could perceive the ship around her through Thane's enhanced senses, could feel the emotional states of nearby crew members through his natural empathic abilities. But she could also feel something else, a cold, invasive presence spreading through the ship as the HFY vessels approached. The enemy agents weren't just arriving, they were already beginning to extend their influence. "The crew is being affected," she warned Thane. "I can feel the mental pressure building." "So can I," Thane replied grimly. "But now we can do something about it." Working together through their bond, Elena and Thane began projecting a protective field around themselves. It wasn't as powerful as what they could achieve with Lyra and the amplifier, but it was enough to provide some shielding for nearby crew members. As they walked, Elena noticed that people they passed seemed to shake off a subtle confusion, standing straighter and looking around with clearer eyes. "We're creating a mobile safe zone," Elena realized with excitement. "Anywhere we go, we can protect people from HFY influence." "Limited range and duration," Thane cautioned. "But, yes, the deep bond allows us to project Zephyrian neural defenses. It's never been tested with a human partner before." They reached the bridge to find Captain Chen coordinating defensive preparations with grim efficiency. The approaching ships had been identified as hostile, and the Harmony's Edge was preparing for potential combat. "Dr. Vasquez," Captain Chen called out as they entered. "Thank God you're here. We've got reports of crew members acting strangely throughout the ship. Mass hallucinations, false memories, people following orders they don't remember receiving." "It's not hallucinations, Captain," Elena said firmly. "We're under attack by an alien species called the HFY. They specialize in mental manipulation and memory control." Captain Chen stared at her for a moment, then glanced at Thane. "Consultant Thane, can you verify this assessment?" "I can, Captain," Thane replied. "The HFY are ancient enemies of my people. They've been using Dr. Vasquez to set up a trap for tomorrow's medical conference." Elena quickly briefed the captain on everything they had discovered, the planned mass manipulation of Alliance leadership, the Unity Protocol, and the scope of the HFY threat. As she spoke, she was gratified to see Chen's expression shift from skepticism to grim understanding. "So tomorrow's conference is designed to turn our allies into enemy agents," Chen summarized. "And these incoming ships are bringing reinforcements to ensure the plan succeeds."
That's correct, Elena confirmed.
But, we have a counterstrike planned. We can turn their own technique against them, expose their presence to everyone in the conference room.
What do you need from me? Chen asked without hesitation. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for her captain's immediate trust. We need the conference to proceed as scheduled.
If we cancel or postpone it, the HFY will simply adapt and try again later. This might be our only chance to expose them. And, we need you to be prepared for the possibility that some of your crew members have been compromised, Thane added.
The HFY agents among them won't reveal themselves unless forced to.
Captain Chen nodded grimly. I'll have security run discreet psychological evaluations on all senior staff.
Anyone showing signs of artificial mental influence will be quietly relieved of duty.
As they spoke, Elena became aware of movement on the bridge that didn't feel quite right. Through her bond with Thane, she could sense the cold, invasive presence of HFY influence touching several crew members. Captain, she said quietly, I'm detecting signs of mental manipulation among the bridge crew right now.
Chen's expression hardened. How can you tell?
The deep bond one share with Thane gives me enhanced perception of neural patterns, Elena explained.
3 people on this bridge are under external influence.
Captain Chen's hand moved subtly toward her sidearm.
Can you identify them?
Elena extended her awareness through the bond, feeling Thane's knowledge guiding her perceptions. Lieutenant Rodriguez at the tactical station, Ensign Kim at communications, and... She paused, shocked by what she was detecting.
Commander Torres at the navigation console. Chen's expression grew stone-cold.
Torres was her second in command, a man she had trusted with her life countless times. The thought that he had been compromised was clearly devastating.
Are you certain? She asked quietly. Unfortunately, yes, Elena replied with genuine regret. The neural patterns are unmistakable. Captain Chen took a deep breath, then activated her command authorization.
Security to the bridge, she said calmly.
Immediate response required. Elena watched with admiration as Chen prepared to arrest 3 of her own officers based solely on her assessment.
It took extraordinary courage and trust to act on information that challenged everything the captain thought she knew about her crew. Captain, Torres said suddenly, his voice carrying that familiar flat effect Elena had learned to associate with HFY control, perhaps we should reconsider the conference arrangements. With hostile ships approaching, it might be wise to delay that, Chen interrupted sharply.
The conference will proceed as scheduled.
Torres turned toward her with movements that were just slightly too precise, too coordinated.
Captain, I must protest. The safety of the Alliance representatives should be our primary concern.
My primary concern is the safety of the ship and crew, Chen replied firmly. And, right now, that means proceeding with our original plan.
Elena could see the moment when the HFY programming recognized that subtlety had failed.
Torres's expression shifted, becoming blank and emotionless, and he moved toward the captain with sudden, inhuman speed. But Thane was faster. Moving with fluid grace, he intercepted Torres and placed his hand on the compromised officer's forehead. Elena felt their bond channel energy through Thane's touch, and Torres suddenly stopped moving, his eyes clearing as if waking from a dream. What? Torres began, looking around in confusion.
Captain? What am I doing?
I was in my quarters preparing reports, and then. You were being controlled, Chen explained gently. It's not your fault, Commander. Similar scenes played out across the bridge as security arrived and the other compromised crew members were freed from HFY influence. Elena was amazed at how effectively their bond allowed them to counter the mental manipulation.
This is just the beginning, she warned Captain Chen.
When those ships arrive, the HFY will begin mass manipulation attempts. We need to prepare the crew for what's coming.
Chen nodded grimly. What do you recommend?
Elena looked at Thane, and, through their bond, they reached a shared decision. We brief the senior staff on HFY capabilities and teach them basic mental defense techniques, Elena said. It won't make them immune, but it will make them harder to control. And we establish rally points throughout the ship where crew members can gather for protection, Thane added. Our bond allows us to project defensive fields, but they have limited range. Captain Chen activated the ship-wide communication system.
All hands, this is the captain.
We are facing an unprecedented threat that requires your full attention and cooperation.
Dr. Vasquez will now brief you on emergency mental defense procedures.
Elena felt a moment of nervousness as she realized the entire crew was listening, but Thane's steady presence through their bond gave her confidence.
"This is Dr. Vasquez," she began. "In the next few hours, you may experience thoughts or memories that don't seem quite right, or you may feel compelled to perform actions that go against your normal judgment. If this happens, don't panic. Find the nearest senior officer immediately and report your symptoms." She continued with a brief explanation of HFY mental manipulation techniques and basic defense strategies. Through their bond, she could feel Thane helping her choose the right words, the most effective explanations. "Remember," she concluded, "your own thoughts and feelings are your best defense. Trust your instincts, question anything that feels wrong, and don't hesitate to seek help if you feel your thoughts being influenced." As Elena finished her briefing, the ship's proximity alarms began to sound. On the main view screen, 3 sleek vessels appeared unlike anything in the Alliance databases, with hull designs that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. HFY ships, Thane confirmed, his mental voice tense with recognition. "They're beautiful and horrible at the same time." Elena could see what he meant. The ships were undeniably elegant, but there was something unsettling about their organic appearance, as if they were predatory creatures rather than constructed vessels. "They're not responding to standard hails," reported the officer who had replaced the compromised Ensign Kim at communications. "But they're maintaining a holding pattern just outside weapon range. They're not here to fight," Elena realized. "They're here to provide mental reinforcement for their agents already aboard. The closer they get, the stronger the HFY influence becomes." Captain Chen studied the tactical display with professional concern. "How close can we let them get before their influence becomes overwhelming?" Elena consulted with Thane through their bond, drawing on his knowledge of HFY capabilities. "At their current distance, they can reinforce existing programming but not establish new control over unaffected crew members. If they move within 1,000 kilometers, mass manipulation becomes possible," Thane finished through their shared consciousness. "Everyone on the ship would be vulnerable. Then, we keep them at distance," Chen decided. "Raise shields and target their engines. If they try to close, we'll disable them." But, as the captain gave her orders, Elena felt a familiar cold pressure building in her mind. The false programming was reasserting itself with renewed strength, and even their deep bond was struggling to counter it. "Thane," she said urgently, "the compulsion is coming back. Their proximity is amplifying the artificial memories." Elena felt Thane's consciousness wrap more tightly around hers, providing additional protection. "I can counter it, but not indefinitely. The closer those ships get, the harder it becomes to maintain our defenses." Captain Chen overheard their exchange and made a quick decision. "Dr. Vasquez, I'm officially ordering you to the most secure location on the ship. If you're compromised, their entire plan succeeds." Elena started to protest, but Chen cut her off. "That's not a request, Doctor. The safety of the Alliance depends on you being able to resist their programming tomorrow." Elena realized the captain was right. If the HFY succeeded in reactivating her programming, all their planning would be for nothing. "The medical bay has enhanced shielding," she suggested. "And it's where I need to be anyway to prepare for tomorrow's demonstration." "Agreed," Chen said. "Consultant Thane, you're assigned as Dr. Vasquez's personal protection. Don't let anyone else near her unless they're accompanied by senior staff you trust absolutely." As Elena and Thane prepared to leave the bridge, the ship suddenly shuddered. On the view screen, energy beams were visible extending from the HFY ships toward the Harmony's edge. "They're not weapons," the tactical officer reported with confusion. "The beams aren't causing any damage, but they're penetrating our shields somehow." Elena felt the cold pressure in her mind intensify dramatically. "They're not trying to damage the ship," she gasped. "They're projecting concentrated mental influence. Everyone's going to be affected." Around the bridge, crew members began to move with that characteristic synchronized precision Elena had learned to recognize. Even some of the senior officers who had been briefed on HFY techniques were succumbing to the focused mental assault. "All hands," Captain Chen announced over the intercom, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Initiate Protocol 7. All crew members report to designated safe zones immediately." Elena and Thane fought their way off the bridge as compromised crew members attempted to block their path. The deep bond between them allowed them to project a protective field that kept the mental influence at bay, but Elena could feel the strain it was causing both of them.
We need to reach Lyra, Thane said through their connection as they navigated corridors filled with confused and manipulated crew members.
With the neural resonance amplifier, we can create a much stronger defensive field. How much longer until she arrives?
Elena asked, using their shared awareness to help navigate around a group of compromised security personnel.
2 hours, Thane replied grimly.
But I'm not sure we can maintain our defenses that long against this level of concentrated assault.
They reached the medical bay to find it already occupied.
A pale figure stood near Elena's research station, tall, humanoid, but clearly not entirely human. When it turned toward them, Elena saw eyes that shifted color like oil on water and skin so white it seemed to glow with its own light.
Dr. Elena Vasquez, the figure said in a voice that seemed to resonate directly in Elena's mind.
I am Silence Walker, speaker for the HFY Collective.
You have been most difficult to guide.
Elena felt terror grip her as she realized she was facing one of the HFY themselves. But, alongside the fear, she felt Thane's steady strength supporting her through their bond.
You're the one who manipulated my memories, Elena said, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded.
I am one of several who contributed to your preparation, Silence Walker confirmed.
You were chosen carefully, Dr. Vasquez. Your research into cross-species neurology made you the perfect candidate for our purposes.
Your purposes being the enslavement of the entire galaxy, Elena replied with growing anger.
Silence Walker tilted their head with an expression that might have been confusion. Enslavement? You misunderstand our gift.
We offer unity, harmony, the end of conflict and misunderstanding between species. By destroying individual identity and free will, Thane countered, stepping protectively closer to Elena. The HFY's shifting eyes focused on Thane with sudden interest.
The Zephyrian. Your people were always resistant to our guidance. But, you cannot protect her indefinitely. As Silence Walker spoke, Elena felt the compulsion programming surge with renewed power.
The false memories crashed over her consciousness like a tidal wave, and, for a moment she genuinely believed that demonstrating the Unity Protocol would be the greatest contribution she could make to galactic peace. But, through their bond, she felt Thane's unwavering certainty that she was being manipulated. His knowledge of her true nature, his memories of their genuine connection, provided an anchor that kept her from being swept away by the artificial programming.
Interesting, Silence Walker observed, noting her resistance. The bond you have formed is deeper than we anticipated. But, all connections can be severed.
The HFY raised one pale hand, and Elena felt a terrible pressure building in her mind. Not the subtle manipulation she had experienced before, but a direct assault on the bond itself. Elena screamed as she felt her connection to Thane being forcibly attacked. It was like having part of her soul torn away, and the pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced. But Thane fought back through their bond, pouring his own strength into maintaining their connection. You cannot break what is freely given, he declared, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the medical bay.
Silence Walker's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. A true deep bond? Between species?
This was not foreseen. There are many things your collective consciousness cannot foresee, Elena managed to say through gritted teeth.
Like the power of genuine love and choice.
The HFY's assault on their bond intensified, but Elena noticed something important: the effort was clearly straining Silence Walker as well.
Whatever power they possessed wasn't unlimited.
Thane, she said through their connection, they're vulnerable when they're focusing this much energy on direct manipulation.
Elena felt Thane's understanding flow through their bond, along with a surge of fierce determination.
Together, they stopped simply defending against the assault and began to push back, using the deep bond to project their own unified consciousness toward the HFY. Silence Walker staggered backward, their perfect composure cracking for the first time.
Impossible. Humans and Zephyrians cannot achieve true unity. We just did, Elena said firmly, feeling power flowing through the bond that was unlike anything she had ever experienced.
And, now you're going to experience what real unity feels like. Through their connection, Elena and Thane projected their shared consciousness directly at Silence Walker. For a brief moment, the HFY was forced to experience genuine emotions: love, compassion, individual choice, the joy of voluntary cooperation rather than forced unity. The effect was dramatic. Silence Walker cried out in what sounded like genuine anguish, their form flickering as if they were having difficulty maintaining physical coherence.
Stop, they gasped.
The chaos, the individual thoughts, it burns. Elena realized with sudden understanding that the HFY weren't just offering enslavement to others, they were already enslaved themselves, trapped in their collective consciousness, unable to experience the freedom they sought to deny others. "You don't have to live this way," she said with unexpected compassion.
Individual consciousness isn't chaos, it's the foundation of genuine connection.
But her words seemed to cause Silence Walker even more distress.
"There is no other way," they insisted. "Unity is peace. Individual thought leads only to conflict and suffering. Individual thought leads to choice," Elena countered. "And choice makes connection meaningful. Without the freedom to choose, unity is just another form of isolation." Silence Walker looked at her with something that might have been desperate longing. For a moment, Elena thought she might actually reach them, might convince them to abandon their crusade for artificial unity.
But then, the medical bay doors burst open, and 3 more figures entered, other HFY, their pale forms moving with perfect synchronization.
Elena felt their collective presence like a weight pressing down on her mind. "Silence Walker has been compromised," one of the new arrivals announced in that flat, emotionless tone. "Individual thoughts have contaminated their consciousness. Purification required," another added, raising their hand toward their fellow HFY. Elena watched in horror as the 3 newcomers focused their combined power on Silence Walker.
The HFY who had shown a moment of individual awareness screamed as their consciousness was forcibly reintegrated into the collective.
"No!" Elena shouted, instinctively moving forward to help, but Thane held her back.
"You cannot save someone who does not choose to be saved," he said sadly through their bond. "And we have larger concerns." The 3 remaining HFY turned toward Elena and Thane with renewed focus. "Dr. Vasquez," they said in perfect unison, "you will now undergo the final preparation. Tomorrow's demonstration will proceed exactly as planned." Elena felt their combined mental assault crash against her consciousness like a battering ram. Even with Thane's support through the deep bond, the sheer power of 3 HFY working together was overwhelming. "I won't do it," she gasped, fighting to maintain her sense of self.
"I won't help you enslave innocent people."
"You have no choice," the HFY replied.
"The compulsion programming is now being activated at maximum intensity. You will comply."
Elena felt her resistance beginning to crumble under the focused assault. The false memories and artificial certainties pressed against her consciousness with irresistible force. Even her connection to Thane couldn't fully protect her from such concentrated manipulation. But, just as her defenses were about to collapse entirely, the medical bay filled with a harmonious sound, multiple voices singing in complex harmonies that seemed to resonate through the very fabric of space itself. Elena looked up to see a new figure standing in the doorway, tall, graceful, with the distinctive features of a Zephyrian but somehow more refined, more luminous than even Thane.
The newcomer's presence immediately eased the pressure in Elena's mind.
"Lyra," Thane said with profound relief through their bond.
"You made it." The Zephyrian consultant stepped into the medical bay carrying a device that hummed with barely contained energy, the neural resonance amplifier.
As she activated it, Elena felt a wave of protective force wash over the room. 3 against 3, Lyra said calmly, her voice carrying the same harmonic qualities as her singing.
"Much better odds."
The HFY turned toward her with expressions of sudden wariness.
"Another Zephyrian."
"This was not anticipated." "Many things have not been anticipated," Lyra replied with serene confidence.
"Including the fact that your entire plan is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what unity actually means." Elena felt her strength returning as Lyra's presence reinforced the protective field around them. Through her bond with Thane, she could sense the network resonance amplifier creating a zone of mental freedom that the HFY couldn't penetrate. "What do you mean?" Elena asked, though she suspected she was beginning to understand. "The HFY believe that unity requires the elimination of individual differences," Lyra explained, her harmonious voice filling the medical bay. "But true unity, the kind you and Thane have achieved, comes from individuals choosing to connect while remaining themselves." Elena looked at the 3 HFY, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't conquerors or manipulators, they were victims, trapped in their own artificial collective, desperate to escape their isolation by forcing others to join them. "You're trying to share your prison," she realized with sudden compassion. "You think if everyone is trapped the way you are, none of you will be alone anymore." The HFY's perfect composure wavered slightly. "Unity is not imprisonment. Unity is perfection. Unity without choice is just shared isolation," Elena countered.
But, unity with choice, unity based on love and mutual respect, that's true connection. As she spoke, Elena felt an idea forming not from HFY programming, but from her own creativity enhanced by her bond with Thane and the protective influence of Lyra's presence. I know how to save them, she said suddenly, turning to her companions. And I know how to make tomorrow's demonstration something that will truly change the galaxy. Thane and Lyra looked at her with interest, while the HFY stepped backward in apparent alarm.
What do you have in mind? Thane asked through their bond.
Elena smiled, feeling certainty flow through her, not the artificial certainty of programmed compulsion, but the genuine confidence that came from understanding and choice. We're going to give them what they really want, she said. Not forced unity, but the chance to experience genuine connection. And we're going to do it in front of representatives from 12 different species, so everyone can see the difference between manipulation and true cooperation. The HFY began to back toward the exit, clearly recognizing that their plan was falling apart.
But Elena called out to them before they could flee.
You don't have to run, she said gently.
Tomorrow's demonstration can include you, if you're willing to experience what real unity feels like.
The three HFY stopped in the doorway, their synchronized movements faltering slightly.
You would offer us choice? One of them asked, the question carrying a note of desperate hope.
I would offer you freedom, Elena replied.
The freedom to choose connection instead of having it forced on you.
The freedom to be individuals who choose to work together instead of fragments of a collective consciousness. For a moment, the HFY stood frozen in apparent internal conflict. Then, without a word, they fled the medical bay, leaving Elena, Thane, and Lyra alone with the humming neural resonance amplifier.
Do you think they'll accept your offer? Lyra asked with gentle curiosity. I don't know, Elena admitted.
But I think we've planted a seed of doubt in their collective certainty. And sometimes that's enough to start real change. Thane squeezed her hand through their bond, filling her with warmth and love.
Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together.
Elena nodded, feeling more ready than ever to confront the challenge ahead. The HFY might still try to disrupt their demonstration, but now she had allies, a plan, and, most importantly, the unshakable confidence that came from genuine unity freely chosen. Tomorrow's conference would indeed change the galaxy, just not in the way anyone had originally planned. The conference room aboard the Alliance medical station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 species took their seats.
Elena stood at the podium, the neural resonance amplifier discreetly positioned nearby, its gentle humming masked by the ambient noise of the gathering.
Through her bond with Thane, Elena could sense the emotional states of everyone present, curiosity, anticipation, and underlying tension that suggested some attendees were already feeling the effects of HFY influence. The three enemy ships still maintained their holding pattern nearby, their mental projections creating a subtle pressure that made concentration difficult for those without protection. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's enhanced acoustics. Thank you for attending this unprecedented demonstration of cross-species neural compatibility research. Captain Chen sat in the front row, her expression alert and supportive. Elena had briefed her thoroughly on the modified plan, and the captain had positioned security personnel throughout the room, though whether they could be trusted remained an open question. Today, I will be demonstrating a technique that promises to revolutionize how different species interact and understand each other, Elena continued, feeling the weight of genuine attention from the assembled delegates. In the back corner of the room, Elena noticed three figures who hadn't been on the original attendance list, tall, pale, with the distinctive shifting eyes of the HFY. They had come to witness what they still believed would be their triumph. Before we begin, Elena said, making eye contact with representatives across the room, I want to speak about the nature of unity itself. What does it mean for different species to work together? What does it mean to share understanding while maintaining our individual identities? Elena felt Thane's presence through their bond, a steady anchor that kept her focused on her true purpose rather than the artificial programming that still whispered at the edges of her consciousness. Many believe that unity requires uniformity, she continued, that for species to cooperate, they must think alike, want the same things, even become the same thing. But I propose that true unity comes from diversity choosing to work together. The Altarian representative, a being with luminous blue skin and large, expressive eyes, leaned forward with interest. Dr. Vasquez, your research into neural compatibility has suggested the possibility of directly linking consciousness between species. Will today's demonstration involve such linking? Elena smiled,
feeling the moment approaching when everything would either succeed brilliantly or fail catastrophically. Yes, Ambassador Keth. Today we will demonstrate direct neural linking, but not in the way you might expect. Elena activated the first phase of the neural resonance amplifier, and, immediately the atmosphere in the room shifted. The subtle mental pressure that had been affecting the attendees eased, and Elena could see confusion clearing from several faces as HFY influence was temporarily blocked. What you just experienced, Elena explained, was the removal of external mental influence that has been affecting many of you since the HFY vessels arrived in our system. A ripple of alarm ran through the gathered representatives. The Vorthak delegate, a massive reptilian being, rose partially from his seat. Dr. Vasquez, are you suggesting that our thoughts have been manipulated? I'm not suggesting it, Elena replied firmly. I'm stating it as fact. And I'm about to prove it to you. Elena activated the second phase of the amplifier, and, suddenly, everyone in the room could perceive the mental intrusions that had been subtly influencing their thoughts. The effect was like suddenly being able to see previously invisible threads connecting their minds to an external source. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several representatives stood up in alarm, while others seemed to struggle with confusion as they became aware of thoughts and impulses that weren't entirely their own. Remain calm, Elena called out, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that Thane had taught her through their bond. You are safe now, but what you're experiencing is what neural manipulation feels like when you can perceive it clearly. The three HFY in the back corner began to move forward, their synchronized steps carrying a menace that hadn't been there before. Dr. Vasquez, one of them called out, you are deviating from the planned demonstration. No, Elena replied, meeting their shifting gaze steadily. I'm performing exactly the demonstration I planned. The question is whether it's the same one you planned. Elena activated the third phase of the amplifier, and, suddenly, her consciousness expanded to encompass everyone in the room. But, instead of the overwhelming, controlling connection the HFY offered, this was different, respectful, voluntary, allowing each individual to maintain their identity while sharing in a collective experience. Through the network of minds, Elena projected the knowledge she had gained about the HFY, their history, their methods, their genuine but misguided belief that forced unity was the only way to end conflict between species. The representatives gasped as they experienced the truth directly, feeling the difference between artificial compulsion and genuine connection. They could sense the HFY's desperate loneliness, their millennia of isolation and collective consciousness that had convinced them that individual identity was the source of all suffering. This is what they offer, Elena said, her voice now speaking directly into each mind through the voluntary network. Unity through elimination of choice, connection through destruction of individual identity. The HFY were now moving with obvious hostility, their pale forms beginning to glow with barely contained energy. This demonstration must stop, they declared in unison. You are showing them chaos, not order. I'm showing them choice, Elena countered, and, through the network, every representative in the room could feel the truth of her words. Elena reached out through her bond with Thane, drawing on his strength and knowledge as she prepared for the final phase of the demonstration. Now I want to show you what real unity looks like, unity based on choice, on respect, on the decision to work together while remaining ourselves. Elena opened her consciousness fully, sharing through the network not just knowledge but genuine emotion, her love for Thane, her determination to protect innocent people, her hope for a galaxy where different species could cooperate without losing what made them unique. The effect was transformative. Instead of feeling overwhelmed or controlled, each representative experienced their own capacity for connection enhanced and celebrated. They could sense each other's thoughts and feelings, but as distinct individuals choosing to share, not as fragments of a larger collective. The Vorthak delegate, who had been affected by HFY manipulation earlier, stood up with tears streaming down his scaled face. I can feel my own thoughts clearly for the first time in weeks, he said with profound relief. And I can feel all of your thoughts too, but they don't override mine, they complement them. The Altarian representative was glowing more brightly than Elena had ever seen from her species. This is extraordinary. I can sense the emotions and perspectives of everyone here, but my own identity feels stronger, not weaker. One by one, the representatives began to speak, sharing their experiences of genuine unity versus artificial compulsion. The contrast was so clear that even those who had been skeptical of Elena's claims were convinced. But the HFY were not ready to accept defeat. The three figures began to combine their power, their individual forms seeming to merge into a single, more powerful entity. You will not destroy our gift to the galaxy, they declared, their unified voice resonating with terrible authority. Unity will be achieved, whether chosen or imposed. The merged HFY entity raised its combined hands, and Elena felt a crushing mental assault designed to overwhelm not just her, but everyone connected to the voluntary network. The attack was so powerful that even the neural resonance amplifier struggled to counter it. Elena felt her defenses beginning to fail under the concentrated assault. The voluntary network started to fracture as the HFY tried to force their artificial unity onto everyone present. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of being overwhelmed by the attack, the representatives began to support each other through the network. Each species contributed their unique mental defenses: Vorthack determination, Altarian empathic shielding, human creativity, and a dozen other forms of resistance. Together, Elena called out through the network, feeling strength flowing to her from every connected mind. Not as a collective, but as individuals choosing to help each other. The combined mental defenses of 12 species, unified by choice rather than compulsion, proved more than a match for the HFY assault. Elena felt the attacking force break against their shared determination like waves against a cliff. But, more than that, Elena realized they could do more than just defend. Through the voluntary network, they could offer the HFY something they had never experienced: genuine unity without loss of identity. You don't have to fight us, Elena projected toward the merged entity. You can join us. Not as conquerors or converts, but as individuals choosing to connect with others. The HFY entity wavered, its unified form flickering as if struggling to maintain coherence. Impossible, it declared, but Elena could hear uncertainty in the unified voice. Individual consciousness leads only to chaos and conflict. Look around you, Elena invited, opening the network to show the HFY what was actually happening in the room. Through the voluntary connection, the HFY could perceive 12 different species working together without losing their distinct identities. They could feel the harmony that came from diversity choosing to cooperate rather than uniformity imposed from above. The effect on the HFY was profound. The merged entity began to separate back into individual forms, each one looking around the room with expressions of wonder and confusion. We can remain ourselves while being connected, one of them asked, the question carrying centuries of desperate hope. That's what we've been trying to show you, Elena replied gently. Unity doesn't require the destruction of individuality. It requires the choice to share what makes us unique. Elena reached out through the network, offering the 3 HFY the same voluntary connection that everyone else in the room was experiencing. For a moment, they hesitated, clearly terrified of losing the only form of consciousness they had known. Then, tentatively, they reached back. The moment the HFY joined the voluntary network was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Their consciousness was so different, so shaped by millennia of collective existence, that integrating them required careful adjustment of the network's parameters. But, as they settled into the connection, Elena felt their amazement and relief. For the first time in their recorded history, the HFY were experiencing individual identity within voluntary unity. They could feel their own thoughts and emotions separate from the collective, while still maintaining connection with others. This is... One of them whispered, tears flowing down their pale face. This is what we have been seeking all along. Freedom to choose connection, Elena agreed. Freedom to be ourselves while working with others. Through the network, Elena could feel the transformation spreading beyond the conference room. The voluntary unity they had achieved was so powerful, so obviously superior to artificial compulsion, that it was broadcasting itself to every conscious being in the system. On the HFY ships, crew members were experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in generations. Instead of the chaos and conflict their collective had feared, they found the peace and fulfillment that came from genuine choice and connection. The 3 HFY in the conference room were openly weeping now, their pale forms no longer shifting and unstable but solid and present in a way they had never been before. We must return to our people, one of them said through the network. We must share this gift, this freedom, with our entire species. And, we will help you, the Vorthack representative declared, his voice full of determination. This network, this voluntary unity, it changes everything about how species can relate to each other. Elena felt a wave of agreement flow through the network as representatives from 12 species committed to sharing this new form of connection throughout the galaxy. Instead of the HFY converting the Alliance leadership, the Alliance was offering genuine freedom to an entire species that had been trapped in artificial unity for millennia. Dr. Vasquez, the Altarian ambassador, said with profound respect,
this demonstration has exceeded our highest expectations. You haven't just shown us a new technology, you've shown us a new way of existing together. Elena smiled, feeling Thane's love and pride flow through their personal bond alongside the broader network connection. The technology was never the important part, she said. The important part was remembering that unity without choice isn't unity at all, it's just shared isolation. As the formal demonstration concluded, Elena began to gradually reduce the scope of the network, allowing each participant to return to their normal state of consciousness while retaining the memory and understanding of what genuine unity could feel like. But the three HFY asked to maintain the connection a little longer. We need time to adjust, one of them explained. Individual consciousness is overwhelming after so many centuries of collective existence. Take all the time you need, Elena assured them. The network will remain available as long as you need it. Captain Chen approached the podium as the representatives began to disperse, many of them still talking excitedly about their experience. Dr. Vasquez, she said with a smile, I think it's safe to say this conference will be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. Elena looked around the room, seeing species that had been suspicious of each other now talking as friends, sharing ideas and perspectives in ways that had been impossible before the demonstration. I hope so, she replied. But the real work is just beginning. Teaching this to others, establishing networks between worlds, helping species learn to connect without losing themselves, that's going to take time and patience. Thane joined them at the podium, his presence through their bond a constant source of strength and comfort. The HFY ships are already broadcasting the new consciousness patterns to their home world, he reported. Early indications suggest that the transformation is spreading rapidly through their population. Elena felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not only had they prevented a catastrophe, but they had helped an entire species find freedom they had never known they were missing. There is one thing that troubles me, Captain Chen said thoughtfully. If the HFY had succeeded with their original plan, they would have gained control over the leadership of 12 major species. The scope of their ambition suggests this wasn't their only operation. Elena nodded grimly. You're right to be concerned. There are probably other worlds, other species that the HFY have been manipulating. We need to establish rapid response teams that can detect and counter their influence. Teams based on voluntary unity networks, Thane suggested. Groups of individuals from different species who choose to link their consciousness for mutual protection and enhanced capability. Elena felt excitement building as she realized the implications. We're not just talking about preventing future HFY operations, we're talking about a fundamental transformation in how species interact throughout the galaxy. Over the following hours, as the representatives prepared to return to their home worlds, Elena worked with Thane and Lyra to establish the framework for what would become known as the Unity Alliance, a voluntary network of worlds committed to genuine cooperation without loss of individual identity. The three HFY who had experienced individual consciousness for the first time remained at the station, working with Elena and her team to develop techniques for helping their entire species transition from collective consciousness to voluntary unity. It will be difficult, one of them, who had chosen the individual name Dawnwalker, explained during one of their planning sessions. Many of our people have never experienced individual thought. They will be frightened. We'll help them through it, Elena assured her. The same way Thane helped me resist your original programming. Patient support, voluntary connection, and the freedom to choose their own pace of change. As Elena spoke, she realized how much her own life had changed in just a few days. She had gone from being an unwitting weapon in an alien plot to being one of the architects of a new form of galactic cooperation. More importantly, she had found a connection with Thane that was deeper and more meaningful than anything she had ever imagined possible. You're thinking about our bond, Thane observed through their private connection, his mental voice warm with affection. I'm thinking about how none of this would have been possible without genuine connection, Elena replied. The HFY's mistake was thinking that unity required uniformity. But real unity comes from different individuals choosing to share their uniqueness. And, sometimes, Thane added with gentle humor, it comes from a human doctor making a joke about marriage and an alien medic taking it seriously enough to offer her his entire existence. Elena laughed, remembering her casual comment about them being married now. I never did get to properly answer your proposal, she said. You answered it when you chose the deep bond, Thane replied. But, if you want to make it official by human customs as well. Elena felt her heart skip as she realized what he was suggesting. Even after everything they had shared, even with their consciousness permanently linked, the idea of a formal marriage proposal still made her pulse quicken.
Thane, she said carefully, are you asking me to marry you? In the human sense?
Through their bond, she felt his nervousness and hope, his desire to honor both their traditions while acknowledging the unique nature of their relationship. I'm asking if you want to make a public commitment, Thane replied. To let both our species know that what we have chosen together is permanent and sacred.
Elena looked around the station, thinking about everything they had accomplished together, everything they had yet to do.
The Unity Alliance would need guidance, the HFY would need help transitioning to individual consciousness, and countless worlds would need to learn the difference between artificial compulsion and genuine cooperation.
Yes, she said simply. I want everyone to know that we belong to each other.
Thane's joy flowed through their bond like warm sunlight, and Elena realized that their personal connection had become a symbol of everything the Unity Alliance stood for, different beings choosing to unite while remaining themselves. As they began planning for both a wedding and the expansion of voluntary Unity networks throughout the galaxy, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. A few days ago, she had been a dedicated but solitary researcher, focused entirely on her work and unaware that her greatest discoveries were being artificially guided by ancient enemies. Now she was not only partnered with the most extraordinary being she had ever met, but together they were helping to reshape the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The irony is beautiful, Elena mused to Thane as they worked late into the station's night cycle, developing training protocols for new Unity Alliance members. The HFY tried to use me as a weapon to impose their artificial unity on others.
Instead, they helped me discover what real unity actually looks like.
Perhaps, Thane replied thoughtfully, their greatest service to the galaxy will prove to be the very failure of their plan. Elena nodded, feeling the truth of that through their bond. The HFY's attempted conquest had inadvertently demonstrated the superiority of voluntary cooperation over forced compliance, creating a living example that would inspire positive change throughout the known worlds. As they continued their work, Elena felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others discover the freedom and connection they had found together. The Unity Alliance was just the beginning of something larger, a transformation in how conscious beings related to each other across the stars. And, at the center of it all was the simple truth that had started with a casual joke about marriage, that genuine connection, freely chosen and lovingly maintained, was the foundation upon which all other forms of cooperation must be built. The HFY had tried to create unity through control. Instead, they had helped humanity and its allies discover unity through choice, a gift that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. 6 months after the Unity Conference, the galaxy looked very different than anyone could have imagined. Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock at the sprawling facility that had become the heart of the voluntary cooperation movement. The station itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering. Altarian bioluminescent materials provided beautiful and efficient lighting, Vortex structural engineering ensured unprecedented stability, human modular design allowed for rapid expansion, and Zephyrian neural integration systems made the entire facility responsive to the needs of its inhabitants. The morning briefing is ready, Thane said, approaching with a datapad that contained updates from across the known galaxy.
Through their deep bond, Elena could feel his satisfaction at the progress they were witnessing. How many new worlds this week? Elena asked, though she could sense the answer through their connection.
17, Thane replied with a smile. Including 3 that were previously under HFY collective control.
Dawnwalker's rehabilitation programs are exceeding all expectations. Elena felt a surge of pride and relief.
Dawnwalker and the other former HFY had become some of the most effective advocates for voluntary unity, their personal experience with both collective consciousness and individual freedom giving them unique insights into helping others make the transition.
The rehabilitation process had proven challenging but ultimately transformative.
Species that had been under HFY control for generations were rediscovering individual identity while learning to maintain voluntary connections with others.
The process was gradual and sometimes difficult, but the results were consistently positive. Any resistance movements? Elena asked, reviewing the datapad's contents. 3 minor incidents, Thane reported. Some Regelian factions are still convinced that Unity networks are just another form of mind control.
But Ambassador Kett's team is making progress with educational demonstrations.
Elena nodded, understanding the skepticism.
After millennia of warfare and mistrust between species, the idea of voluntary mental connections was understandably frightening to some. But patient demonstration of the difference between forced compliance and chosen cooperation was gradually overcoming most resistance. Speaking of demonstrations, Thane continued, his mental voice carrying a note of gentle amusement, Captain Chen has requested that we perform the wedding ceremony in the main conference hall. She wants it to serve as a public example of voluntary unity between species. Elena felt her cheeks warm slightly. Their engagement had become something of a galactic sensation, the first recorded deep bond between a human and a Zephyrian, celebrated throughout the Unity Alliance as proof that genuine connection could transcend any difference. Sometimes I feel like our personal life has become a political statement, Elena said with rueful humor. Only because what we represent matters to so many people, Thane replied gently. But, if you prefer a private ceremony. No, Elena said with growing confidence. Chen is right. If our relationship can help others understand what voluntary unity looks like, then we should share it. Through their bond, Elena felt Thane's love and admiration for her willingness to use their personal connection to serve the larger cause. It was, she realized, another example of the principle that had guided them from the beginning, individual choice creating something larger than the sum of its parts. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Sarah Kim, Elena's former research assistant who had become the director of Unity Network Research. Sarah's expression carried a mixture of excitement and concern that immediately put Elena on alert. Elena, Thane, Sarah said urgently, were receiving distress signals from the Kepler sector. A planet called Zirion Prime is reporting mass mental manipulation on a scale we've never seen before. Elena felt her blood run cold. Sherry High? No, Sarah replied grimly. Something else. Something that's using Unity network technology, but corrupted somehow. The reports describe voluntary connections being hijacked and turned into control mechanisms. Elena felt Thane's alarm echo through their bond. They had always known that the Unity network technology could potentially be misused, but they had built extensive safeguards to prevent such corruption. How is that possible? Thane asked, his scientific mind immediately focusing on the technical aspects. The network protocols specifically prevent forced connection or external control. That's what we thought, Sarah said, handing them a data crystal containing the detailed reports. But someone has found a way to subvert the voluntary consent mechanisms. They're creating what looks like genuine Unity networks, but with hidden backdoors that allow for complete mental control. Elena absorbed the information with growing horror. The corrupted networks were targeting worlds that had recently adopted Unity technology, exploiting people's trust in the voluntary connection process to enslave them more completely than the original Sherihai had ever managed. We need to get to Zirion Prime, Elena said with immediate determination. If someone is perverting our work to enslave people, we have a responsibility to stop them. Agreed, Thane said through their bond. But we should be prepared for the possibility that this is more than just technological corruption. Someone with deep understanding of Unity networks would be required to create such sophisticated subversion. Elena felt a chill as she realized what he was implying. You think it's someone from within the Unity Alliance? Someone who helped develop the technology? I think we can't rule out that possibility, Thane replied soberly. Within hours, Elena and Thane were aboard a fast courier ship heading for the Kepler sector, accompanied by a team that included Dawnwalker and representatives from several Alliance species. The journey gave them time to study the reports from Zirion Prime in detail, and the more they learned, the more disturbed Elena became. The corrupted networks were incredibly sophisticated, maintaining all the appearance and initial experience of genuine voluntary unity while gradually introducing subliminal control mechanisms. Victims would begin by freely choosing to join the network, experience all the benefits of enhanced cooperation and understanding, and only slowly realize that their choices were being influenced by external control. It's diabolical, Elena said as she reviewed the psychological profiles of affected individuals. They get all the benefits of genuine unity until they're completely dependent on the network, then, they discover they're trapped. Worse than that, Dawnwalker added, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had experienced both collective consciousness and individual freedom. This corruption could destroy trust in voluntary unity throughout the galaxy. If people believe that all networks eventually lead to enslavement. Elena understood the implication. The corrupted networks weren't just enslaving their victims, they were potentially destroying the credibility of the entire Unity Alliance movement. We need to find out who's behind this, Elena said with grim determination. And we need to do it before they destroy everything we've worked to build.
The courier ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zirian system, and Elena immediately felt something wrong.
Through her bond with Thane, she could sense a distortion in local space, not physical, but mental, as if the fabric of consciousness itself had been twisted. There, Thane said, pointing toward the planet's surface where geometric patterns of light were visible even from orbit. Massive network activity, but the patterns are all wrong. Elena extended her awareness through their bond, trying to analyze the distorted network signals. What she found made her stomach turn. The networks on Zirian Prime weren't just corrupted, they were actively hostile, designed to trap and consume any consciousness that came into contact with them.
We can't approach the planet directly, she realized.
Those networks would try to incorporate us the moment we came within range.
Then, how do we help the people down there? Asked Lieutenant Morrison, the ship's tactical officer.
Elena studied the sensor readings, her mind racing through possibilities.
Then, suddenly, she had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal.
We don't fight the corrupted networks, she said slowly.
We heal them from the inside.
Thane immediately understood her thinking through their bond. You want to deliberately allow the network to incorporate us, then, use our connection to introduce healing algorithms into the corrupted system.
Exactly, Elena confirmed. Our deep bond is too strong for any external network to control or corrupt.
We could enter the system as a kind of healing virus, spreading genuine voluntary unity to replace the artificial control mechanisms.
Dawn Walker looked at them with something approaching awe. That's incredibly dangerous.
If you're wrong about the strength of your bond, you'll both be lost to the corruption. Elena felt Thane's complete confidence flowing through their connection, along with his willingness to take any risk necessary to help the enslaved population below.
We won't be wrong, Elena said with quiet certainty.
Our bond was forged in resistance to artificial unity. It can't be corrupted because it's based on genuine choice and love.
The plan they developed was complex and risky.
Elena and Thane would use a modified Unity network transmitter to broadcast their consciousness into the corrupted planetary network, maintaining their bond while appearing to be separate individuals seeking connection. Once inside the corrupted system, they would work together to identify and disable the control mechanisms while simultaneously teaching the trapped consciousnesses how to recognize and resist artificial compulsion. The key, Elena explained to the team as they prepared for the attempt, is that we're not trying to destroy the network, we're trying to restore its original voluntary nature.
And if something goes wrong? Lieutenant Morrison asked pragmatically. Elena exchanged a look with Thane, feeling their shared resolve.
Then, you withdraw to a safe distance and warn the Unity Alliance about the nature of this threat. The transmission chamber they set up was based on Sci-Fi technology they had captured and studied, modified with Unity Alliance improvements and safeguards. As Elena and Thane took their positions, connected to the transmitter array, Elena felt a moment of profound apprehension.
Second thoughts? Thane asked gently through their bond. A few dozen, Elena admitted.
But none strong enough to change my mind. Those people down there need our help, and we're the only ones who might be able to provide it. Elena felt Thane's love and determination strengthen her resolve.
Together, they activated the transmission array and sent their consciousness streaming toward the planet below.
The moment they made contact with the corrupted network, Elena understood the true scope of the horror they were facing. Thousands of minds were trapped in an artificial unity that mimicked genuine cooperation while slowly draining away individual identity and choice. But, worse than that, Elena could sense the presence behind the corruption, a consciousness that felt familiar and deeply wrong at the same time. Thane, she said through their bond, I think I know who's responsible for this. Through the network connection, Elena reached out toward the controlling presence, and, when she made contact, her worst fears were confirmed. Dr. Marcus Webb, she said, recognizing the neural patterns of her former colleague.
You're supposed to be dead.
The presence turned toward them, and Elena felt Marcus's consciousness, but changed, corrupted, twisted into something that bore only partial resemblance to the man she had once known. Elena, Marcus's voice echoed through the network, carrying a coldness that made her shiver.
I was wondering when you would come. You always were too curious for your own good.
Elena remembered Marcus as a brilliant but unstable researcher who had been working on consciousness transfer technology before his apparent death in a laboratory accident 6 months ago. Now she realized that his death had been faked, and he had somehow survived by transferring his consciousness into artificial networks.
What have you done to these people? Elena demanded, feeling the trapped minds around them crying out for freedom.
I've given them what you promised but failed to deliver, Marcus replied with bitter satisfaction. True unity, perfect cooperation, freedom from the chaos of individual choice. Elena felt sick as she realized Marcus had taken the corruption of Unity Alliance technology to its logical extreme. Unlike the Sherihai, who genuinely believed they were offering a gift, Marcus was deliberately enslaving people for his own gratification. This isn't unity, Elena said firmly. This is slavery with a pleasant mask. This is evolution, Marcus countered. Individual consciousness is a failed experiment, Elena. I've simply accelerated the natural progression toward collective efficiency. Elena felt Thane's presence strengthen through their bond as they prepared to begin their healing work. But, before they could start, Marcus launched a direct attack on their connection, trying to sever their bond and leave them vulnerable to his control. The assault was vicious and sophisticated, designed to exploit any weakness in their relationship. Elena felt Marcus probing their shared memories, looking for moments of doubt or conflict that he could use to drive them apart. But Marcus had made a critical miscalculation. Their bond had been forged in crisis and tempered by challenges. Instead of weaknesses, Marcus found only deepening trust and love. Impressive, Marcus admitted grudgingly as his attack failed. But ultimately irrelevant. You can't heal corruption of this magnitude, Elena. I've rewritten the fundamental protocols of consciousness itself. Then, we'll rewrite them again, Elena replied with calm determination. Working through their bond, Elena and Thane began the delicate process of introducing healing algorithms into the corrupted network. Instead of trying to force change, they offered the trapped consciousnesses a choice: remain in artificial unity or experience genuine voluntary connection. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Consciousness after consciousness reached out toward the freedom Elena and Thane offered, abandoning Marcus's artificial unity in favor of genuine choice. No! Marcus screamed through the network as he felt his control slipping away. You don't understand what you're doing. Without central control, without guidance, they'll destroy each other. They'll choose for themselves, Elena corrected firmly. And that choice is what makes connection meaningful. As more and more trapped minds freed themselves from Marcus's control, Elena began to understand the full scope of what he had been planning. Zirion Prime was just the beginning. He had been developing techniques to corrupt Unity Alliance networks throughout the galaxy, creating a vast empire of enslaved consciousness under his control. But, now, with his test case failing, that entire plan was crumbling. You've won this round, Marcus conceded, his presence beginning to withdraw from the network. But, this isn't over, Elena. There are other worlds, other networks. You can't protect them all. We don't have to protect them all, Elena replied with quiet confidence. We just have to teach them to protect themselves. As Marcus's consciousness fled the collapsing corrupted network, Elena and Thane worked with the freed minds to establish genuine voluntary connections. The process was gradual and careful, ensuring that each individual truly understood the choice they were making. When they finally withdrew from the planetary network and returned to their physical bodies aboard the courier ship, Elena felt exhausted but triumphant. Through the observation ports, they could see the geometric light patterns on Zirion Prime's surface shifting from the rigid structures of artificial unity to the flowing, organic patterns of voluntary cooperation. Status report: Lieutenant Morrison requested as Elena and Thane recovered from the consciousness transfer. Zirion Prime is free, Elena replied with satisfaction. The corrupted networks have been healed and replaced with genuine voluntary unity systems. And the individual responsible? Dawn Walker asked. Marcus Webb, Elena said grimly. A former colleague who apparently survived his supposed death by transferring his consciousness to artificial networks. He escaped, but his control system on Zirion Prime has been completely dismantled. Thane squeezed Elena's hand, and she felt his pride and love through their bond. We should return to Unity Station immediately, he suggested. If Marcus is planning to corrupt other networks, we need to develop countermeasures quickly. Elena nodded, but, as she looked down at Zirion Prime, now glowing with the warm patterns of freely chosen connection, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had faced a new threat to the principles they believed in and emerged victorious. More importantly, they had demonstrated that genuine unity based on choice and love was stronger than any artificial system based on control and compulsion. The wedding will have to wait a little longer, Elena said to Thane with rueful humor. Our bond doesn't need ceremonies to make it real, Thane replied gently through their connection. But, when this crisis is over, I look forward to celebrating what we have with the entire galaxy. Elena smiled, feeling their shared love and commitment strengthen her resolve for the challenges ahead. Marcus Webb represented a new kind of threat, someone who understood Unity network technology well enough to corrupt it, but lacked the wisdom to use it responsibly. Stopping him and others like him would require vigilance, courage, and the continued cooperation of species throughout the galaxy. But Elena was confident they would succeed, because their cause was built on the strongest foundation possible, the free choice of individuals to work together while remaining themselves. As the courier ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of their victory back to Unity Station, Elena reflected on how far they had all come. What had started with a casual joke about marriage had become a galactic movement toward genuine cooperation and understanding. And, at the center of it all remained the simple truth that had guided them from the beginning, that real unity came not from forcing minds together, but from hearts choosing to connect. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but, with allies like Thane, Dawn Walker, and countless others who believed in the power of voluntary cooperation, Elena was confident they could face whatever threats emerged. After all, they had something their enemies could never understand or replicate, the strength that came from love freely given and trust voluntarily shared. The Unity Alliance would endure and grow, not through conquest or manipulation, but through the simple power of individuals choosing to work together for something greater than themselves. And Elena Vasquez, who had once thought herself destined for a life of solitary research, now found herself at the heart of the most important social transformation in galactic history, all because she had been willing to trust an alien medic who had taken her joke about marriage as a serious proposition. Some connections, she reflected with deep satisfaction, were worth everything it took to protect and nurture them.